Okay, we are ready.
I'll fix it.
But where are we going? Okay. All right, we are live. This is What Does the Bible Say? I'm Caleb Robertson, and this is my dad, Johnny Robertson, and tonight we're doing our special broadcast to get everybody ready for the John Mark Hicks interview that will be premiering tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. The thing about the interviews is a lot of people just won't know. When we did the Lagarde interview, I had numerous people telling me or say to me, "Who is this guy?" They had never heard of him, which was not crazy. I mean, I could understand they had never read one of his books, but to me, it's like, how did you miss him in the write-ups? And so I imagine it will be the same way for John Mark Hicks. There will be a collection of people that will say, we don't know who this person is. And I had someone the other day just say to me, why are you interviewing him? Well, all of it creates discussion. It's close to 3 hours long, and it's bringing pieces of information to people's thinking that I think that otherwise they wouldn't have. So really quickly, 276-806-3641. That's my phone number. My email address is calebgrobertson@gmail.com. Now, I want to say this as we get going, and then we'll start having some discussion about the interview itself. So this is what I said last time, and these are the photos of the people who have been interviewed thus far. That's me and Alan Hires, and that's Alan laughing about a story over Leroy Garrett. That's just me and Rubel. I didn't have a shot of him laughing, but he had some laughs in there. Steve Wolfgang and I, Steve laughing, Lagarde Smith and myself having a moment where we were laughing. And this is what I said last time. There are individuals who would like to just dismiss us and call us fringe. And I asked the question, if we are just absolutely fringe, and maybe you need to look up what the word fringe means.
For real.
So if we are absolutely fringe, I don't know how we have gotten into some of these rooms. And so, and then I also asked this question, how is it that we're fringe when we're getting into rooms that your preacher could not get into? And if your preacher got into the room, could your preacher even have a conversation? And obviously Rubel was the first, and so I told Rubel as we were sitting in this room and we were talking about the possibility, I told him, I said, maybe don't tell some people that it's me. And then I said, because they might tell you don't do it. And then Rubel's response was, well, don't get yourself in trouble messing around with me. And I said, well, I don't care what any of those people think. And then Rubel said, well, I don't care what any of those people think. He knew what he was getting into. And I gave him our information. And I said, you can look at this and see anything that you want to see on there. And a handful of months later, I think it was just 2 months later, we record, I think 2 hours, close to 2 hours. So, but here's what I want to get at really quickly. And then Dad can start jumping in. We're not, when I say fringe group, it's not like I'm interested in promoting the brand. What does the Bible say? It's not this ministry that has to be prolonged beyond your death into me and then all that stuff. Oh, yeah. What we really are shooting for is we want to motivate people to work. And I have 2 more photos to add to this list. In December, if you can see that shot, that's me reading something off paper to Mac Deaver. Mac Deaver is having a good laugh. Now here's me, John Mark. I think John Mark actually made the joke that time. But we both have a good laugh. And here's my thing. Everybody is having a good time, and we're really coming down to matters. And we're getting to have, I don't think that a load of people would want to have these conversations, and I just have to say, I interviewed Alan Hires, and I said to Jason Rollo, we can go in the same library and talk, and he said, I don't have anything to say to you, so I can go talk to Mac for 3 hours, John Mark Hicks, very close to 3 hours, and so here's what I say this. Just about everybody that I've interviewed has at some point had a conversation or a discussion point about Alexander Campbell. I'm not a Campbellite. I'm not trying to promote Campbellism, but this is a history book the history of the Presbyterian Church in the state of Kentucky, and this is what Presbyterians noted about Alexander Campbell. He gradually made a number of converts to his no-creed views. In less than 20 years, to the number of 150,000 members, and upwards, it says. And they noted that the way that he did this, Mr. Campbell's forte is controversy. Everybody in those shots are controversial figures. But when I go through and I'm having these conversations, there will be a common thread through all of them, and it is that church politics stink and that we need to get super busy on this. No creeds, no sects. There needs to be freedom, there needs to be controversy, and you cannot grow and have conversation without controversy. So that's what I just wanted to put in there, is it's not promoting a brand, it's promoting hard work.
One of the things that that John Mark said in the interview, he said that he really didn't like name calling. And it was something that he tried not to do, and he didn't think that it really, made for good dialogue because it's disrespectful. And lately, a friend of yours that, if we were to tell, is in a group that is massively known, and he said something about the fact that their policy had been not to call names, but then he said about us, he said you, doesn't seem to be hurting y'all.
Yeah.
And look at this. I mean, look at all the people that are talking with Caleb, and this is candid Christian, and they all end up talking about each other on a video that's going to go out. And so, and to that slide that you just showed, when this past week I've been in Dallas at the first Southwestern Conference with Geno Jennings crowd, and I had a chance to talk to him yet again. And one of the things that I was able to show him or tell him, and just to let you know, Caleb, he has no idea what he's dealing with when he's dealing with us. I mean, he gets it. And so I said to him, you told me this, to tell him this, that the Church of Christ, basically, you want to say it, the two most well-known men.
I don't remember. Oh, is it Campbell and Stone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Both of them rejected the idea of being a Trinitarian.
And I basically said they affected, the point I was trying to make is that there isn't a church on the continent like the Church of Christ. These churches came from Europe, yet the Church of Christ, it wasn't birthed here,
right?
But the seed was planted, and all of a sudden, the continental U.S. has a church that the seed was planted on virgin territory, as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, they call it, in a historical aspect, they call it the largest indigenous American church.
And so I didn't tell him that. Naturally, you can tell that I didn't think to use the indigenous. I don't know that. Never mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, it blew his mind. They were not Trinitarians. And so, and I'd like to say this too about what we're doing. I keep hearing people talking about us from the standpoint of, all they're doing is trying to get views. You know what the number one question is when you go on a mission field, as it's called, or you have a campaign or whatever, and people start asking questions, and what they always want to know, how many baptisms did you have? But yet when we're talking about views, all of a sudden it's our ego. And what do you want? I mean, I'm saying, what do y'all want us to do? Since Saturday of this past Saturday, the meeting that I had with Geno Jennings, there are 80,000 views. And it's like, we are getting the message out to this charismatic group of people, and the way we're doing it is exactly what we're reading and what you're talking about. These guys need to read. And
you wouldn't be using the term charismatic necessarily in a Pentecostal sense, but as a charisma.
Yeah.
So, also, and it's like, we've had conversations too about when you said going into a mission field, it's like people want a resume. They want to know what your experience is. We want to know what you can do. It's like, are we just tagging along as a worthless piece of flesh? Because, I mean, you want someone on the team who can work. And I've heard people give reports, and I said it, it was at Wesley Simon School. One man talked about a mission trip that he took, and he said, we knocked this many doors. We had this many Bible studies. We did this many sermons in this amount of time. We taught this many classes. And then Wesley said, did you baptize anybody? And we were all eating at Shoney's. And I said, it's a collection of people. And I just said, Wesley, if they had baptized people, would he not have said it? And my thing was, it didn't make the effort meaningless because no one was immersed at that moment. And so, how are we doing? Is there any adjustment that we need to make? We're good? Okay. And so the thing about the views, it's like working hard just to try. And there's just a lot of not trying going on anyways. I wanted to show people when he said about Alexander Campbell and Barton Stone, both of them rejected the title of being a Trinitarian. You can find those notes in the 1840 edition of Millennial Harbinger. Stone just said, people are calling me a Unitarian. And he said, I have rejected that title. And he was sending a letter to Alexander. And then Alexander Campbell said back, well, I reject the title of a Trinitarian. And he said, so I don't have a problem with that. And he just said, I don't like all the jargon that goes into it. And so,
who could explain that in our brotherhood anyway?
Yeah. And they typically all have the same way of doing it that clearly has not been satisfactory to people. It's like, well, we have, it's water, ice, gas, and it's like,
egg.
Yeah, an eggshell, the egg yolk, the egg white, and it's like, well, that's not that great. But, it's a problem that we don't know ideas that are out there and then just to get in there and talk about it. And I don't really like the idea of someone said, well, let me just stop everything that we're doing and run up a flagpole. And I think the commonality, too, is trying to get people to straighten up their lives. Geno Jennings is interested in that. Clean up your life. Clean up your marriage.
There was 2,000 plus people there.
Yeah.
And it, my observation is they were trying to be holy people. And they were doing a grand job. And I've been criticized for praising them. And it's like, why would you criticize someone who is actually involved with, and two, people are saying that nothing's being done in the Church of Christ.
Yeah.
Where are y'all? Where do you live? We can't, our schedule is so packed that it is just simply unbelievable.
Yeah, one of the things interviewing with Mac is I had old newspaper clips from Mansfield, Texas, where he lived and worked. I think it was his first work. And Mac's statement was, he said, if you're working in a little community, he said, it's not very hard to establish yourself. And I think he did the graduation ceremony at a high school. I had different articles from him. And then he started thinking about it, and he said, if you stir the pot, you can get yourself in there pretty quick. And so that's what we're saying is these small towns, like when Dad just said, who are the Church of Christ? What are they doing? What are they trying to do? Yeah, I do think if you're in a small enough town, there's really not an excuse for you to be unknown.
That's exactly.
And it's like between door knocking, PTA, school board meetings. I mean, you could be in a school board meeting challenging evolution, homosexuality. Y'all should be having bigger gospel meetings. And I'm just saying, I went to a chicken restaurant 2 Sundays ago, and the politician came up and said to me, aren't you? And it wasn't reverse. It wasn't me saying, hey, aren't you the politician? It was him coming up and saying, aren't you so-and-so? And then we start talking. And I think that all y'all could be doing that, and you could be establishing yourself for the gospel's sake in a local community rather than focusing on getting on a lectureship so the brotherhood knows who you are.
Well, a lot of people act like that this is just some geographical oddity. And where I started preaching was Detroit, Texas, 800 people in Detroit, Texas. And we had a tent meeting within a year or two of me getting back. I knocked all the doors. I actually lived in Detroit, left and went to Memphis School of Preaching, and the church built a brand new house while I was gone. There was no house. They built a brand new house while I was gone. And the gentleman that was preaching there with me, who actually had trained me and mentored me, he decided to take no salary, and they used his money to build a very nice brick house. And so, when I got back, there I am, and it was no time. I mean, no time, Caleb, that people, just from knocking doors, that they were all stirred up. Matthew 16:18, and Geno Jennings is using that same verbiage, those same passages. They're all stirred up. But the point I wanted to get to is when, after we had our first tent meeting, actually second tent meeting, somebody put it on television. I didn't. My memory.
Yeah.
In Paris, Texas, which would have been the town, in the next county, a good-sized town, and the local youth minister in the biggest, we're talking 400 to 500, 600 member congregation, came down to the town with 800 people in it and wanted to know how he could get in fellowship with us. And he was an Abilene graduate. And so, this is not rocket science.
Yeah.
It is controversial. I certainly wasn't meaning to be controversial, but it just is what it is. And if you don't know these people, what we're really doing, I can't wait. Is there an end, Caleb, where I know there's probably not going to be an end because you just wouldn't believe the people that want to be interviewed. But at some point, we're going to have this block of information that to me is so, and I don't want to downgrade anybody, but it's so much better than Trailblazer books. I mean, I cut my teeth on those books.
Yeah.
But they're cameos of these old-time preachers. And what you're getting, man, the stuff you're getting to hear is an entire life, and the guy is sitting there. So if you make a mistake, he's hearing it, and this one is so comical, the things that he forgot that you had. But I'm saying at some point, if you had all of these together, you would be able to, very likely, you would be able to look at the congregation where you are, or start talking to some of the older members, and they would say, yeah, we remember when so-and-so started teaching this or that, and that's why we are where we are, and that's why that other congregation is over there. I mean, a lot of this stuff goes back to Abilene, different congregations that have split in Abilene, and so you are creating a body of work. There is no body like this, no body of work where you're getting to see all sides. Now, I give Steve Wolfgang this, his accolade is he put together some meetings that supposedly you get to see the sides, and I'm saying that was great.
Yeah.
We loved it. But this is much more in detail in regard to actually finding out these men. They don't have time in those meetings, do they? And they don't even, the venue's not to talk about yourself.
Oh, well. And I said to Steve, and he agreed, which I didn't see or hear 88, but Steve said 1988 was so bad. The left side progressives. He said
Nashville?
That's right, Nashville. He said it was so bad that, I think it was Johnny Ramsey and maybe somebody else came up and said, can we please have a round two? But then I told Steve, I don't think that they did well in round two. So, but his reasoning was, one of the things that he said for 88 was, he said, I wanted that meeting because I knew that when the left side progressives got to the microphone, he said, I knew what they would say. And he said, some of my students didn't believe me when I told them this is what they will say. So I do want to have a moment about the interview with, Mac and John Mark Hicks. So there is one aspect where some people wouldn't believe it if it wasn't documented. So John Mark and I are going to have a whole segment where we talk about his newest book, Women Serving God. And towards the back of the book, he has a quote that will be in the interview where he just says, women have full capacity to participate in any realm as a man does in the church. And so he recently retired from Lipscomb University. And so this is an aspect of it. I could tell people that Lipscomb University is just regularly, consistently promoting women preachers. Lauren King, who taught at, 4th Avenue Church of Christ in Franklin, she came over sent from Lipscomb. John Mark just retired, and then he writes his book in 2020. So there are some people that I think they would not believe it unless they just hear it in the interview. And so we will discuss it in the interview, and then also for Mac's Holy Spirit ideas, he had a whole hour Mac is the first person that I have interviewed where it was solid 3 hours long, and about an hour at the end is the Holy Spirit conversation. So that is one thing that Steve said about, I knew what would be said, so I wanted it to be said. And there's a portion of that in some of these interviews, to where I knew what would come out and I wanted it to be there. But also, there's a lot of stuff that needs to just be told, as far as John Mark will have very good notes about personal evangelism, just like different individuals. Like Steve Wolfgang had fantastic personal evangelism. Mac has a load of personal evangelism, and those things need to be told, because that is what I'm saying. It's not the brand, it's the work. And so I try to find those to be in there.
Well, let me say this. I'm saying this to the crowd. You really should give Caleb a lot of credit. Number one, who else could get this done? Who else has done the research that these guys see one of them and they're like, oh, I'd like for this guy to interview me? Because, I mean, Elf Lagarde was being restored. His actual, what he talked about is that he was given a bad rap, and Caleb basically brought out all of the things that no one would want to sit and talk about themselves, but would like to get it out, and you did it. And so he was so happy. And here's the thing too, y'all. There is no room for people complaining about Caleb not arguing with these people. You want to draw the information out and get them to tell things some of this stuff they've never told anybody before. And secondly, I am just telling you, I'm sitting there watching it, and I think that if I were doing the interview, I would have to let this person know that as you're telling me this and you're, actually being instructive, I would probably say, I know. Mm. And Caleb has kept his ego out of it, and he is doing a fantastic job just letting these men give their story and elicit all of this information it's just, Caleb, who says that later all of these can't get together in a event center and talk about what they learned about each other and appreciation that they may have, and say, if you could do it all over, could you do something that would bring us a little bit closer together? This is so much better than a Joplin meeting, because you don't find anything out in the Joplin meetings. It's usually a bunch of, if anybody even knows what a Joplin meeting is, a unity meeting with the Christian church. These guys could actually see this and find out things they didn't know about their adversary, just like me with Geno Jennings apologizing to the man. You have no idea the good, and I promise you this is going to be a really good one.
Well, when you said about things that people didn't know, there is one thing that John Mark said in his interview, and I said, I didn't know that. And then he said, well, it's because I never told anybody that. Mm. So there's pieces of that in there, and I wanted to go back and say about the controversy, like, if someone says, well, I know Johnny and Caleb and they're controversial, and that's where I say everyone on the screen is controversial. Rubel Shelley, his work was controversial, and I would say because he was making people think, and the whole 1984 Open Forum was a controversial scene, but it's like, well, Alan Hires participated in it. If we're just so anti-controversy, Alan Hires should have said, not now. Yeah. We'll do this sometime later.
Everybody loved it.
Yeah, everybody loved it. And then, of course, Steve Wolfgang in the 88 and the 90 meeting. And
so, Caleb, pieces of information, like to give us a break. So, you are in charge, so I'm asking. There's a piece about Mac Deaver and Rubel Shelley.
Mm. Well, I don't know. I'm thinking of two different pieces.
Well, it's something that nobody would believe, the one. And you find it out.
Well, there's two pieces that I still think no one would believe. So, is it that they knew each other when they were younger?
No.
Okay. That they're still in contact now?
That's right.
Yeah.
Who would believe?
So, essentially what it is, we were going to Texas in December, and as we drove to Texas, we stopped by and visited Rubel Shelley's house. and I took Rubel Shelley a Christmas gift.
It was actually a gift that you had promised him.
I had it since I interviewed him, and I just needed to get it framed. And so I had passed through Nashville different times, tried to get it to him, and our schedules didn't work out. And then this past December, we get to be in his house. We give him the gift. And as we're sitting there, I told him, I said, well, when I'm in Texas, I said, I'm going to interview Mac Deaver. And of course, as Rubel and Thomas Warren are doing Spiritual Sword, Rubel is going to know who Roy Deaver is. But even still, when I said that, I didn't really think in my head that there's going to be any connection here. And as soon as I said that I'm going to go interview Mac Deaver, then Rubel said, oh, well, he said, Mac and I were just emailing the other day about one of the new books that he had been working on. And it was just... Now that I'm saying that, my thought is what you said to Michael White at Get Well about, is there no appreciation for Rubel's old work? Wouldn't you like to have Rubel Shelley back? And then, Michael is like, would I like to have Rubel Shelley back? Well, then Mac is still consulting with Rubel's brain, and also, too, just picking, I guess if Mac can do that, that was news to me.
Yeah.
But Mac gets to do that, pick Rubel's brain, and I don't know what it was that Mac was working on, but that's the way he said it just the other day. And so he said, tell him I said hello when you see him. And then, of course, we get to have that conversation with Mac and the different connections, because Mac is just as close to Thomas Warren as I said Rubel Shelley would have been in that interview.
Well, the fracture in this picture is just unbelievable. And for all of them to see each other talking about things that they prayed about and grieved over as it was happening, my zeal really was birthed in a split. When I saw the church split, and Mac Deaver actually ended up, being the preacher, it's like, then all of a sudden it becomes extremely important. Man, people were siding up on one side of the building or the other in Clarksville, Texas. And one particular group of individuals, one of which had worked with me, came with guns in the back of their car. And it's like, this is a huge building that we're talking about in Clarksville, Texas, probably seat easily 500 people. And they were, very instrumental in the building of it. That guy's daddy was an elder. And they were going to take the building. They couldn't conceive that the lower income and education, I'm going to say it that way and somebody will get mad at me, but I'm just saying, I don't think the elites got the building. They could not conceive that building that was built to fit their ego, as Kelly Lawson would say, was going to go to the ne'er-do-wells or the cotton pickers or whatever you want to call it. But that is, and I love those people. That's where I straightened up. And for them to take me in with my reputation, it just was horrendous. And so if we could roll back time, well, we're doing it. Yeah. We're rolling back time.
Well, that is a note about like splits. So when you're having a split, that can either be like the people who hate each other the most because the split was so hot. But then one note that Ed Harrell says about division is, he said, typically the people who split from each other keep affinity. And so while most of the people that are actually in these videos, a lot of them don't have too much to do with the other, I think that they all still feel pretty good about each other.
With the exception of one that we're not going to tell, but you know personally how one of them feels about the other one, and the other one has no idea that he feels that way.
Yeah.
So,
so it's like
I'm saying though, you could call him up and tell. I mean, you wouldn't unless there was just. I mean, you never know what a piece of information can do. But there are two characters in here, one of which thinks that he's very well thought of, possibly, and it isn't the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never was the case.
Right. And so, and there would be a little bit of a generational divide, but that's part of the hard thing for my generation as I'm going through and talking to Lagarde, just turned 80, and I don't know what Rubel would be, 1945.
So I think he's 78.
And then, Mac. And so it's like my generation is detached, but they're still have these ideas about, I just think that it's just schools. Schools are separate from other schools, but at this point, it's like, well, what makes them different? And the ignorance level, and I'm not trying to be ugly, but I'm just saying the stuff that we were uninformed at school about anything. Somehow we thought Memphis was the best, but we didn't know why anything else would be inferior. Mm-hmm. I mean, that wasn't discussed. So there's a bunch of it that's going into it, and I hope that part is helpful. I will say this, going back to this slide about the no creed views, and we can use some of your time signatures if you're ready. I think that a lot of people, as I do these interviews, I don't know that they would understand Steve Wolfgang's point of view and different things that are just topics that I had with LaGard Smith about Pepperdine. They're going to have to go back and do different research on that, and it will be that way with John Mark and with Mac Deaver. So here's what I wanted to say. I think there's a lot of people in the church, as they watch these interviews, that they don't understand what it means to have a no-creed view. And what I mean by that is there are people out there that are saying, well, we follow the Bible only. But what they really mean by that is they follow their preacher's positions. And their preacher is typically following the school's position. And so the difference is someone has a written down creed and the other person says, well, I don't have a creed. And that's where I would say, no, but you do have that hierarchy behind you.
And a lot of times the congregations have the same school supplying their preacher for decades. So what you actually have, I have talked to so many people, Caleb, that tell me on the phone, which we already know this. They're like, I was in Texas and I was attending a Church of Christ, and I go to Florida and I go in and I kind of expect that it's going to be different because there's no written material that we're ascribing to here. And it's exactly as it is in Texas. And they're astounded. California, that used to be a very common thing. People don't even talk about the Church of Christ anymore. But it was amazing how that we could not have a creed, and yet we resembled each other. Just almost, there's a few things that would have been different, but it was a very tight-knit group of individuals that were taught early on.
Yeah, and then also, like, when people would say the historic, like, there's a difference between Texas thought and Tennessee thought, and I would say not really, because both of those people, Tennessee and Texas, they were teaching people to be baptized for the remission of sins. So that wasn't different. It's not like you had people saying, oh yeah, say the sinner's prayer and you're okay. No, like, that's an unbiblical idea. Texas, Tennessee, both were saying you need to be immersed, and the Bible says it's for the remission of sins.
Well, the people who encouraged me to go to school were people from Texas, but one of them had gotten his degree in Tennessee, in Vanderbilt. The other one had gotten his in Cookeville, Tennessee. So they're coming down into Texas back and forth. So it really is amazing that it is a no creed view. But these days, it is just, you have to do it. You have to find out some names that are associated with, and then the circle you're in, and it's unbelievable that it can be as fractured as it is. I don't have a problem at all, Caleb, saying that I appreciate these men.
Oh yeah.
And they did things that moved us to where we are. They are different, but that doesn't mean, just as I said, these people, I cannot imagine that these people can't get together in a room and there be a setting where they would be willing to talk about the things that they heard each other say and say, I didn't know you felt that way, or I didn't know, and now I see why you have this position. And some of this is a bit fragile. Some of the positions are a bit fragile.
Yeah. So, and then some of them, it just across the board, some of them were not worth fighting over.
And who could moderate this?
Yeah.
You could.
So,
I mean, that's where they are. That's the common thing that they would all have if they came to a meeting, is that Caleb is involved and he knows them all, and they've all talked to him, and it's like, hey, I just got off the phone with so-and-so, and he said he would be willing to meet if you would. And it's a shame. Can you imagine a person say, nah, I don't think it'd be worth my
Well,
time.
there is one person who I called Steve Wolfgang. I think I was calling him. I usually don't tell anybody when the next person who it is to be interviewed because I don't want somebody to call and be like, don't do it. But I didn't think Steve was going to do that, so I told him that the next one back then it was going to be Lagarde. And like as we were getting off the phone, Steve Wolfgang said, he said, try to see if you could get Rubel Shelley to be in a room with me. And he wanted to talk.
Steve?
Yeah, Steve Wolfgang.
Oh, yeah.
So he is pitching that idea. And then I did talk to Rubel on the phone before going to see John Mark, and I pitched that to Rubel, and he just said, we'll see what we can do. But it wasn't like a dismissive. So maybe it is a good idea. And as people would say, there's more commonality in some ways than there are disagreements, but then some of the disagreements are pretty big.
But if you wouldn't, if you said no,
Yeah.
why? I'm just saying to all of these individuals that are watching, you may have some influence or whatever, and you'd be thinking about this. Why would Rubel Shelley, if he knows that Steve Wolfgang wants to talk, is Steve going to take advantage of him? Is there some way that Steve Wolfgang can make him look bad? Why would you not want to sit down and talk about how many years has it been since the split? Like for real, go play in the traffic.
Oh, that one, it was for sure solidified by 1968.
So, wow.
And people were still moving around.
And they've talked to you. You're not in any of their parties.
Right.
And so, and I, to date, is there anybody so far, and this makes you a chameleon in some people's minds, is there anyone that you cannot now discuss with?
No,
I talked to Steve today.
Right.
And I called Lagarde Smith for a lawyer question. And he got back with me, rung me up twice, and I missed his phone call, and he's still ready to talk.
I have had contact with all of them post
Yeah.
interview, and just in different ways. And
Well, it can't be because you're a liberal, because look at the people you're talking to. This is an anti. Lagarde Smith claims that he's an anti
Right.
still, and
John Mark will tell that he almost was an anti, and
Rubel says that he's against mechanical music and women preachers to this day. And it's like, it is. And Mac wasn't happy with us the last time he saw us. Not this time, but the last time we were in Indianapolis, and it was a debate, and we were doing the videoing, and he really was not happy with the crowd that we were associating with, and now we're not associating with them any longer. So, but still, that's the point. If this can be done by us, I'm in the room with Caleb, basically doing the servitude, whatever I can do, and this is all happening. It is just absolutely ridiculous for someone to say, well, no, we'll never get back together.
Yeah, well, also, we have a slide coming up in a little while about just actually trying to talk to people rather than saying just, well, they're pointless, never going to happen. And I just don't have a problem with trying, and you would think that they wouldn't either. I just don't like this idea where everybody's always counted as they're dishonest, they're not going to make any type of movement, on and on and on. And it's the Bible is filled with people who made good moves in a good direction.
Well, what do we do, Caleb, when we're debating the sectarian folk? We study their material. If they're alive, we try to figure out where they were, how come how they are right here, and now you actually know. I cannot believe the information about John Mark Hicks. It's just, he was this guy that entered into the Answering the Church of Christ venue many years ago here. Mm-hmm. And when I saw today, something I sent you, when I saw his actual blog, I was like, man, I saw Jay Gwynn on that blog, and Jay Gwynn was involved with Todd Deaver, was he not?
Right.
And,
Grace Conversations.
Yeah, so it is amazing. And now, once you have I don't hate Jason Rollo, But the last time I saw Jason Rollo, it was such an angry, angry person. And we have the video, and you're not seeing it, so that ought to tell you something about us. We're not wanting to make Jason look bad, but it's like, and I tried 3 different times in College Station to get in touch with those guys, and they wouldn't respond. But I'm saying you learn these people, and you involved with them personally, it changes how you feel. There's just something about your own self, everybody's self, is when you sit down and it's like, no, we're not fighting, we're learning. So, again, good job.
Well, thank you. One note, too, when you say about, we're going to play that clip in just a moment, getting in the room with people and, having some feeling about them. This is that moment where somebody would say, well, if you're saying you get in a room with somebody and it alters the way that you feel about them, and then they say, well, then why don't you try to get in a room with XYZ and B.J. Clark? We have tried to be in a room with B.J. Clark. We have tried to be in a room with Jason Rollo, Terrence Dindy, Keith Mosier, and... You
were in the room with Keith Mosier.
Yeah, I was in the room with Keith Mosier, and then he hollered at me, which didn't...
In front of everybody.
Yeah, in front of the student body. Doesn't bother me. And who we've had, contact with Jay Lockhart.
In the room.
Stafford North. Yeah, in the room with Jay Lockhart. In the room with Jay Lockhart. In the room with Wes McAdams. And,
Earl Edwards.
Wes McAdams didn't really have a problem when we saw him at Focal Point, but it was...
Mike Bonner.
Mike Bonner just blew up. And, it's like he blew up, when he came back and he apologized to you. What's Wayne Jones' dad? David Jones, he blew up in the middle of Focal Point, pulls you into the library, apologizes to you. And we were just there to talk to Jay Lockhart, Wes McAdams, and we're talking to Wes McAdams about Royce Money, and he didn't really want to do it. It's like, well, he was living in Abilene at the time. So being in the room with all these people, it's not like we're not willing to do it or try. And then, as you said, Earl Edwards, candid phone call with Earl Edwards. And then Micah was in the room with, you were talking to Milton Sewell. Micah was in the room with Earl Edwards and Tom Childers. So, you got to give us something for trying.
2 apologies and 1 blow up.
Yeah.
Now, y'all try to beat that. Jason Rollo, you need to apologize. You blew up, and Mike Bonner apologized for blowing up. And David Jones is a director. Is he the director, co-director of the School of Preaching now?
I don't know that he has that position, but he's
they're
teaching
naming stuff after him over there.
Yeah, he's teaching in Wesley Simon School. There was something else too about. Now I can't think of it, but just all these different folk. And that's what it was about Mac. Mac and Lagarde. When I got done interviewing Lagarde, this is why I say, give us something for trying. Even if you say, well, I don't always like it. So, do you see anything anywhere that you say, I liked 100% of what those guys did? Never. And so, when I was done recording with Lagarde, he said, how do you do it? And I just laughed and dismissed it. And then he said, no, I want to know, how do you do it? And I said, well, I have to do my main job. I said, you guys are just a hobby. And that's what I said to Mac. Because Mac said, how did you unearth
Caleb, what have you been doing with your time?
Yeah, that's what he said. And so it's just a side note because we are still focused on local evangelism, which is where I say we're not promoting a brand. We're trying to encourage a work, and it's local work, and it's people's souls, and that's how you build up the church, is getting lost people into the body of Christ where they can clean their life up rather than just always, ministering to people who are fellowship. They're in the boat.
So here's a quick note, and I don't think we've told this. When you think about how did you get in the room and what are the hurdles? So Caleb has been trying to line up a discussion with Malcolm Hill's son, David Hill. And, it was going good. David Hill found out that I had tremendous respect for Malcolm. Malcolm helped me. I never would have gotten to the mission field without Malcolm Hill. And so, David's saying, okay, I'm going to talk. We'll decide. So we get there, and the vice president kicks us out of the building, or tries to. We're in there, all friendly. We happened to be there before him that day, and we're waiting on David.
Yeah.
And the vice president comes in, and he's like, no, just And then he goes, and he's talking to me. I know what you're up to, and there's the door, and y'all can hit it. And the hilarious thing is, we weren't invited by him.
Yeah.
David had invited you, and we were able to say, look, we're staying. The president invited us, and so he had to go on, about his business. So this is tremendously difficult, and these are the things that you deal with. But look, I would say that particular person would be very happy to apologize at this point. He's going to have to do something.
Yeah.
If you end up having the interview.
Yeah. His thing was stuff that he was saying, I know how you are, and I was saying, well, you've never met me. I'm just in this room. So now all this, like I've been saying the whole time, is one of the notes that you've been making is trying to, just have the past generation at least have a conversation with each other. And then I've been saying that the discussions are for the young guys who are not going to have a clue what it is. And I'm trying to think. John Mark has some, I'm not saying like he did it, but I'm just saying just the way the interactions went, they're not great. I'm saying nasty interaction with Ira Rice.
Oh.
And so I want folk to be informed, and what is it? To be forewarned is to be forearmed. And so you know what you're going into. You have some ideas about what's going to be there. But here's a note that's going to be in the discussion, and this is on hermeneutics, because this is another book that John Mark Hicks wrote, Searching for the Pattern, My Journey in Interpreting the Bible. It's a hermeneutic book. Joey, can you make us disappear? And then this short clip will play.
Visions, fights over buildings, and all kinds. That gets really personal and complicated. For me, in the 90s, it was more I am trying to understand what's going on, and how to understand the Bible, and how to help people deepen their faith and help the church grow. And I never had the edge that said, well, I'm not going to talk to those people anymore. I never felt that way. I still don't feel that way.
Okay, we'll come back. Now,
he didn't say I was just trying to find things out, did he?
He did in the 90s.
Okay.
He said, I was trying to figure these things out, find these things out, and he said, try to discover how to study the Bible. And so here's the thing. He said in the 90s, John Mark Hicks had already been to Freed-Hardeman, and when he got done at Freed-Hardeman, he transferred out to a school, and he moves over to a school in like the D.C. area, and then he goes to Westminster Theological Seminary. So he got his Ph.D. in 1985, and in the 90s he said, I'm trying to figure out hermeneutics. And so I am saying to young guys, when you come out of school, it's like your education is beginning. We just can't keep up this thing where these young guys have all this pressure to just know everything. John Shannon said that, he said, when you go to a hospital, he said, your doctor had to practice underneath another doctor. Mm-hmm. He said, we got these young guys out here. He said, nobody has helped them. Mm-hmm. And I agree. But I will say this, going back to Steve Wolfgang's preaching school, if we can say it that way that they were doing that, he did, I think, a good job having, if he calls them interns or whatever, but getting young guys to show the ropes. And because it's like, everything in school is just theory. And it's, depending on who your teacher is, it may not even be great theory.
Well, going forward, Caleb, like drive a little spot here, you are actually showing me things that I was very, very curious about with these different ones, and I'm seeing many things much clearer. But just so you know, those of you who are watching, all of these people aren't in that generation. We actually know what is the problem with David Brown. We know what the problem is with Brown Trail. We know what the problem is with Memphis School of Preaching, the Moundsville School of Preaching in West Virginia, East Tennessee. I know people in all of their histories going back for 30 years. Who can tell you what's going on with these guys? I can. Johnny Ramsey supported me personally. and that's Brown Trail at the time. One of the elders there, I still know him. You just moved to Austin, and Jerry Moffitt has been extremely helpful to us, great friend to us, and Jerry Moffitt was in there right before David Brown comes in. Joseph Metter, we're best friends with one of the students' dad that was there with Joseph Metter when he went off. Just keep going. It's not like, it sounds like a gossip session. No. You want to know why they're fractured and who did what and how all this stuff happened. That is our world.
Yeah. And I think about knowing it as just avoiding it. Like if I know what they did, then I can start basically mapping out. And this is where I say we're playing chess. Everybody's playing chess. Some people just play better. But if I know this is the stuff that they got into it about, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Or if I say, no, we needed to do that, then I know how to see it coming. And that's what I'm saying for these young guys. And there's just so much more to know about like what's coming down the road. And I'm more concerned about these guys in a local community doing their evangelism. Like you said, you start cranking up the evangelism, and the long-time traditional Church of Christ folks start getting mad because you're, bringing in new people. I don't know these people.
Yeah.
I want them to know that stuff and be like on the lookout for, don't just let them fire you, dude, and you don't have some type of plan at all. Because the only thing that they're getting to think about is like one event a year. This is the lectureship, and I heard dudes sitting at the table at Memphis saying, I worked all year on this sermon. That is so sad.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Just that, that you're supposed to be like the top crowd preaching on lectureship, and it takes you a whole year to even do that.
Well, I hate to, after I praised your ego just a moment ago, the last time that I preached in Portland, second to the last time, I preached that lesson here.
Yeah.
And I just went to Portland and preached that lesson.
Right.
And was invited to another lectureship, and they said, you don't even have to do a manuscript, nothing. Just come and preach that over here. And it's like, why is that the case? It's because we're involved in so many things, and we're getting to study so many different things. It was a lesson on grace.
Right.
And, that's what are we doing? These people saying that we're really, we've gone crazy on grace. That was 2014, 13 or 14 when that happened. And so, and two, there's going to be some people that are watching this as a result of seeing John Mark. You may go back and watch this. I assume you're going to tag the two together once they see it. Listen, as far as what we do, what you've heard about us, well, they're very controversial and all that, I can say this, and I don't think with any contradiction, we have a larger footprint in the sectarian world than any of y'all. They don't know you exist, and it is what it is. Sectarian people know us all over. I mean, you go to somebody say, well, how did I test that? Go to Mesa, Arizona, and go to the largest, it's not going to be the largest congregation, but the most well-known Calvinist, and find out, do you know about these guys? Are they a threat? There's no way, given the way we debate, that James White is ever going to debate Born in Sin with us.
Yeah, Jeremiah Norte didn't just unfriend me on Facebook. He blocked me on Facebook. It's like I don't even interact with him, but he did that. So,
and you can go to Philadelphia and do the same thing.
Right.
Do you know these people? And y'all, you're selling your power, the power of the gospel and the truth. You're selling yourself short while you fool around and mix and mingle with each other at these lectureships. It
is an odd thing that people can hear these talks that we do, and they basically say, well, I just felt like you criticized us for an hour. But in reality, like what I say is, no, I'm saying that we have confidence in the gospel, that you can take the gospel out and do a good job if you just try.
Well, the preachers that we know, Mike Bonner, I know that Mike knows about us and what goes on, but they continue. Is he on the School of Preaching in Texas?
I think he visits. I don't think that he's like a full-time.
And why in the world, you're not replicating this? And I was thinking of somebody else that I was going to mention. But we're just saying, Chris Groda. Chris has been here to our tent. Has Chris been on television, or you remember?
I think that he went on TV.
And just on and on we
He
really
certainly
could go.
he certainly remembered Charles.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I saw him in the last 3 years, and he really went on about Charles Rourke, Star News
Yeah.
Studios.
Yeah.
So, and he's in Mount Pleasant. So, looking at this information, this is what I want to do with the interview. Get y'all ready for some thought process. When you come out of school, like John Mark said, I was 1990s, had his PhD. He said, I wanted to get in there and figure out hermeneutics. And I asked the question earlier about people say we're following the Bible, but then this is what I want you to think about. Are you following the Bible for yourself, or are you just trusting your preacher? Which is what you would say sectarian people do. Baptists don't read the Bible. They just listen to their pastor. Members of the Church of Christ, in a large swath, do not read their Bible. They just listen to whatever their preacher says. And I'm saying that a bunch of these preachers don't have a thought beyond what the school taught them. And so this is just a note this is a diagram from John Mark Hicks' book, Searching for the Pattern. And his point is, people would say, this is what the Bible says to do, and we do it. And John Mark is saying, no. You had to put thought process in. Here's what the Bible says. We had to think about it. Then we had to start putting it into practice. That is not an incorrect sentiment. But the problem that a lot of people in the Church of Christ are having is they refuse to do step 2. They do refuse to think about it. And, this is not a moment where someone says, well, other people have different hermeneutics. Sure. But he is talking about Thomas Warren's when is an example binding. The examples, generic, specific, exclusive, inclusive, coordinates, and expedients. I mean, he's writing from Roy Deaver. When it talks about coordinates and expedients, that is classic Roy Deaver. And then the rest of it is Thomas Warren, when is a Bible example binding. So, look, you need to read this book.
Bernard Smith, same thing. You need to read his book on hermeneutics.
And it's not like someone says, well, is this like a 100% wholesale pitch? No, I don't give that to anything but the Bible. But this is out there, and then here's another thought that goes with it, which is a problem that we're having. And I want to say this too. It doesn't hurt my chances. One of the most requested interviews is John Shannon. It just is. And one of the things that he said when we saw him recently was, he said, I am so sick of being told don't read XYZ. And he was talking about even when y'all went to Memphis School of Preaching in the late 80s, he said, they told us a bunch of books to not read. And he said, now I feel like we missed something. And here's what I'm saying. People who would tell you don't read John Mark Hicks because he's a Lipscomb liberal would then tell you don't read Ed Harrell because he's a Florida College anti. Now, this is a quote. This is still hermeneutics. And everybody has to think about this. And now I have to say this too. The people who are thinking in these terms are the people who are thinking about reducing division. So Ed Harrell said this, and it's a paraphrase. Ed Harrell said, disagreements do not divide us. Disagreements manifest differences in our hermeneutical approaches, and that's what divides us. And it's from the 1966 Reed lecture that he gave, and it's part of the appendix to the new biography of Ed Harrell, Explorer in Search of Zion. John Weaver wrote it, and he put 3 of Ed's favorite articles in the back. So if you get
Is that a signed copy?
No, this one's not. I'm waiting on the signed copy.
Yeah. So how does Caleb get a signed copy from the president of Florida College? In case you don't know, Florida College is the school where folk that are non-institutional,
as Ed would say, it's the non-institution institution.
And so, just another plug.
Yeah.
You're moving around in all these different circles. And are you interviewing him?
Yes. We talked, but it's just unscheduled.
I was about to say that the last one was coming up, but it's not then. There's 2 more that are actually to be done, and then Mac Deaver is still waiting to be rolled out.
So, This idea, though, and everybody has to think about it. Now, here's the next slide. This is Ed Harrell says, it's not the disagreements. The disagreements just manifest that we're thinking in different terms. This is a problem, and this will be in the interview. This whole discussion, and some people, I wouldn't have known him by face. This is William Woodson, and he was teaching at both Freed Hardeman, then later Lipscomb College, and he's in the Bible department. But William Woodson participates in the 1992 Preacher Forum, and John Mark and I will have this extended conversation about this. John Mark loves William Woodson. I'm going to say this too about John Mark. John Mark is extremely gracious, and I do not think that it is feigned. Mm-mm. You know, some of that stuff that I wanted to talk about with Rubel, and some things he would just kind of, well, maybe. And, you know, you have to think about it where someone says, well, I bet Rubel didn't want to get in there and just feel like he was dogging these people, you know, 40 years later. John Mark does not dog these people. He just openly praises William Woodson. And so let's have that note there, and you'll see it in the interview. But I do want to say this. William Woodson's start out first two paragraphs in the 1992 Preacher's Forum manifests the problem. When he gets up to talk about Ephesians chapter 2, this is what he did. He said, I want to let everybody know that I stand with representative men among the churches of Christ. The roll call could be extended. I would include such men as Gus Nichols, B.C. Goodpasture, H.A. Dixon, Franklin Camp, N.B. Hardeman, Guy Woods, and many, many others. Mm-hmm. They have taught and upheld these same principles for generations. These same principles are upheld by many faithful today. All he did was what he said, roll call. It was a party line dog whistle. Everybody, and I like Franklin Camp, you know, just, but no, I'm not lining up to Gus Nichols. I'm just not lining up to H.A. Dixon. Or B.C. Goodpasture or N.B. Hardeman, and I have to tell you too, neither are you. Like if people really knew about, and I'm not saying like it's dirty stuff, but it's just known positions. You wouldn't line up to that stuff, and that's part of the problem. And you know what? He did that in 1992, and Hardeman Nichols did it in 1990 at the Dallas meeting. So can we go out again? And I'll play this clip. And this is just, everybody has to realize this is what's happening.
Brother Harold, which do you regard as a more important loyalty, to the church or to the hermeneutic, and why?
Boy, I want to answer that other one too. I think that that answer's absolutely correct. That what those men were loyal to, I believe, was the hermeneutic, was the principle. And when I read their writings, I would frequently see where it seemed to me they were clearly violating that. But, you know, we don't see everything at the same time. So I think they were loyal to the principle. And my answer to that is that I am loyal only to the hermeneutic. I am loyal to the Church of Christ in the divine sense, but not in the earthly sense at all. I have absolutely no sense of denominational pride or loyalty.
Now, I think that that's what William Woodson was talking about. They asked Ed Harrell, are you loyal to the hermeneutic or to the church? And this whole talk at the 92 Preacher Forum was about hermeneutics. But William Woodson started out by saying, I'm loyal to these brethren who make up the church in the South. But it's like there's loads of people that didn't even make that list. Look, I'm not for that. And I think that your problem, a lot of young guys, and let's all be honest, I mean, we know a lot of young guys who have quit. Mm. And it's like, well, what was bugging them so much? Because it's like local stuff is going to be everywhere. You said recently about people being fired, and you said, well, who hadn't been fired? You know, it's like you're going to have it. But I think that people really and truly own. I think that young guys are not being able to think. And I've said before, not that I don't have the freedom to think, but on occasions where I do get engaged in a conversation that I know is beyond me, the feeling that I have is that I feel like the room gets small and my ears get hot. So I know what it's like But I think that people are held up in this system where they're not allowed to think. And essentially when you do start thinking is just when the party police and the hierarchy starts coming down on you, and they just say, we just know that what you're spouting isn't party line.
Well, since we've talked, on one of these, Caleb, you have actually met some brethren that you didn't know before. Why don't you tell what was going on in Florida, in Jacksonville, Florida, and how that things changed, and this is exactly what's taking place today, and this is why these guys don't get to think.
Are you saying about the eldership?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a brother in Christ in Northern Virginia, we do, and he was looking for a congregation for his literal blood brother. And he told me he was going to be in the Jacksonville, Florida area, and so my thought was that I was going to put him in touch with Ed Harrell's son-in-law. And I knew where the congregation was that Russ Roberts had been, and I found out that he wasn't there anymore. And one note to me was that it was a church split. And Russ said, no, it wasn't a church. He said it wasn't a church split. And he said, essentially, to be a church split, there would have to be conversation. And he said about Ed Harrell's ideas about having conversation with people he disagrees with. He said, my father-in-law was willing to have conversation. And he said he didn't mind you disagreeing because...
He had been an elder there.
Yeah, that's right. Ed had been an elder at Jacksonville. And the idea was, while we disagree, if we both respect the Bible and we have our Bible study, someone's going to change. And Russ said people misunderstood that. And he said the eldership after Ed had died, he said they just wouldn't talk. And he said they had basically, the idea was there were things that he wasn't allowed to teach on. And he said, I'm not doing that. And he said, but if you were to ask them, he said, I don't know what you would hear. And then he said, that's the problem I'm having is, he said, I can't ask to even find out what the positions could be, would be. And young guys are certainly, and
And so what's behind that? The elders don't know. The reason why the wall goes up and you can't seem to get, into the eldership.
Yeah.
If you really want to know, we have a video up that was done by Jonathan Geis in Rome, Georgia. He is not a preacher. He is a newly converted individual in the last 5 years who fell away and then came back. He took on 6 elders by himself. He recorded them. And they just basically realized that one elder needed to repent, and he laughed about the fact that he needed to repent. And you think I'm going to repent?
Yeah, Ron Vick.
And so that's, that is the kind of thing we're talking about. The chances of you getting to see an eldership really perform are slim to none. And that one is classic.
Right. And then also it's like we were 19, 20 when we were at Wesley Simon School, and it was, Wesley was the serious elder, and we knew that, other elders in the eldership were saying that family members are an exemption from withdrawing fellowship in the church, and we were students, and we were saying, no, it's not, and then, Wesley is then having to go talk to the other elders, and it's like, we didn't have a direct conversation with the elders. We talked to Wesley, and that somehow, I don't remember how that got aired, that the other elder just said no. And then I was like, well, now we're having to do this. But I said this too, and Lagarde said he didn't have a problem with the preaching school scenario, but Lagarde told me that I don't understand academia. Well, I would say that I don't know that he knows about preaching schools.
For sure.
A preaching school is not Pepperdine law. And so I said the elders are the unmovable piece, and the preacher just gets sacked, and the elders call the school and pick up another guy, and the school's happy to give him another guy because they get money from the church treasury from that congregation. And I don't see how that's working out. And these young guys don't have any type of, they can't shake anything at it. They're just, and I think too now, then Lagarde said, you don't really hear about, this is my last sermon, I'm going to get fired. And I'd say, yeah, that's why. Because they know they're not going to have anybody in their corner. The elders aren't going to back them, and the school's not going to back them. So all these conversations are to help you see these dialogues that have already happened, that we should be able to get to benefit because they happened, and then you start putting it into your own practice. And this, these were the men who asked that question. I don't know who asked it, but they were the ones talking back and forth to Ed Harrell and Steve Wolfgang. Hardeman Nichols and Adrian Doran. I don't know how old he is, but, you know, all he did when he got up was said, I've been doing this stuff longer than Steve Wolfgang's been alive. It's, you know, but you're asking the question, are you loyal to the hermeneutics or are you loyal to the Church of Christ? And that's the 1990 Dallas meeting. And I don't think right now that a lot of people know. And so I want now for y'all to think about this. So we've got the hermeneutic conversation in there. Let's do it one more time. If you can find that, read it. If not, I can send you a PDF of it. You can get this on PDF for like $1 or get it in paperback. This book just came out. You'll have access to Ed Harrell's notes on hermeneutics, and he's talking to Christian church people and disciples of Christ folk. Now, I do want this on here. Everybody remember the quote where Jason Rollo said, I'd like to rip Rubel Shelley's head off and eat it in mustard. And, you know, Keith Mosier talks like a tough guy and whatnot. I do want it to be said, I'm talking to these people who y'all just simply condemn. And, you know, as if, while the disagreements are there, as if they're not like blood-bought Christians like you are. And as if there's points in these conversations where someone says, you know, if there's enough grace for Keith Mosier to go to heaven, there's enough grace for these people to go to heaven. It's just, and put me in it, you know, like, so, okay, right back at you. Yeah, that is right back at me. But this stuff is getting ridiculous. And I do have to ask this question. We do local work, you know, and the tent meetings and the debates and the, you know, 3 nights a week, 2 hours in the daytime broadcasting. And I have to say, what are y'all doing while you're putting folk in hell? And it's just, these two have one of the cushiest setups that you could imagine, where they just go around to the lectureships and they get to have their sit down. I don't know what their dad's name is. Their uncle's name is Dan, if I'm not mistaken. And so they are just, you know, what would be the word? Not royalty, but it's like this Church of Christ air where you come in and you do that. Glenn Colley is Gary Colley's son. B.J. Clark, you know, he's Freed Hardeman, grad, goes over to Memphis School of Preaching. He didn't even go to the Memphis School of Preaching. But they're just doing these lectureship lineups just over and over and over, and it's all softball stuff. And then Jason Rollo started the school so that he could pattern, you know, J.D. Tant, Texas Preachers. They all call themselves Texas Preachers. But we're not seeing anything out of that. And someone says, well, they just got started up. What? No. They got started up and they dove, you know, feet first into PTP. They dove feet first into just mainline, activities.
Jason Rollo was basically in the youth section before they did the school. I'm saying he couldn't surpass the youth events. And you know, when you're talking about, say for instance, John Mark Hicks, you need to recognize that on the end is Jason Rollo, and on the other end is B.J. Clark. That puts the Texas School of Preaching, just that one person puts the Texas School of Preaching in very close proximity to the very people that you're condemning over here. Effelgard Smith, John Mark Hicks, and Rubel Shelley, all of them are, I'm telling you, and Alan Hires, you could put him on here too. Y'all are all, if they had cologne on, you're in smelling distance. That is how close you guys are, and you don't even realize it while you condemn them. And we're the ones who constantly can connect the dots. So if you haven't seen our Grave Era section, you need to look at it. I mean, well, how powerful is it? Phil Sanders is no longer on PTP. Who is Phil Sanders? He is in charge of In Search for the Lord's Way. It used to be that there was nothing bigger than In Search for the Lord's Way. We are not saying we brought him down or In Search for the Lord's Way. We're saying his fellowship was so toxic.
Right.
And now it's known these other guys are the exact same way. Glenn Colley, I have basically clips from a sermon where Glenn Colley coaches you on how not to tell somebody that you will be lost if you're not in the Church of Christ.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable. Gary Colley was not that way. And so, it's really, it really is amazing. These other two guys, the Jenkins, Lads to Leaders, that is just, who is on the board these days?
Oh, for Lads
It
Leaders.
used to be, we've got pictures together with Jay Lockhart with them, and that puts Jay Lockhart was directly involved with Abilene's past presidents, OCU, acapella. People say, we don't know acapella. Can I break it down for you? How about praise and harmony? Oh yeah, we use praise and harmony to. That's what we use to get the vibe going before our assembly. Yeah, that's Keith Lancaster. That is acapella, and his co-founder is over in Atlanta, North Atlanta, with Don McLaughlin. They have mechanical music, and Don McLaughlin's daughter is a female preacher in the Church of Christ. They're all linked while you condemn John Mark Hicks.
Well, I didn't know. So what I was looking at for Jeff Jenkins, this is the thing that I was going to say is, it's crazy to me just that Rubel is always the name, like Rubel Shelley. And so I'm saying I was looking up Red River Encampment to see to remind myself Jeff Jenkins had been on Red River Encampment with people like Orpheus Hayward, which I would say, you're just moving towards what y'all envision Rubel Shelley. The thing that's just crazy to me, and I want to say this too, the thing that is crazy to me is of all the people who are involved in the conversation, and like you used the word chameleon earlier, I just think that Freed Hardeman is the most inconsistent group in the conversation, because you could talk to people on the right, they're going to tell you what they think. And, Steve Wolfgang. And so you talk to Steve Wolfgang, he's going to let you know, this is what I think. And if you talk to people on the left, they're going to let you know, this is what I think. But when you're talking to people in the middle, they are trying to hide.
That's exactly right.
And it's like, I can't do that. And so that's why I tell everybody right now, Terry Gardner is mad at me because of him sitting next to on the platform with Orpheus Hayward. And so then my thing was, I said, here he is with Orpheus Hayward. And I said, and then Terry gets to come over to Freed Hardeman. And I said, is Freed Hardeman going to let Terry bring Orpheus Hayward? My big issue there is Freed Hardeman. That they don't try any harder while they have, who was it? Was it Jay that said they're the last bastion of soundness? Boy, that is such a badge to pin to yourself. Freed Hardeman is the last bastion of soundness in the whole brotherhood of the Church of Christ.
While he was actually going back and forth with OCU.
Yeah.
And Stafford North asked the question, we have it on tape, is Jay trying to distance himself from us?
And, you have Alan Hires wrote the book on how do you spell fellowship, and it just, that's the thing that just blows my mind. I tried to talk to Terry Gardner after the fact, which was public information that he did that. And he just said the same thing that Freed Hardeman people say is, he said, I don't know who that is. And he said, I just happened to be on the platform with him. And then I asked him, so you're saying you're not in fellowship with him? And then he didn't give me a response. So I'm still trying to talk to Terry Gardner. But as I say it in the middle, the Freed Hardeman stuff I think is the worst. That they bring in these Pepperdine speakers, you ask questions, it's like, you're a bad guy for even asking. It's like, hello, y'all have Alan Hires, how do you spell fellowship? And y'all just do big F, little f, more than Rubel ever thought about doing. So,
and then too, we have a lectureship book with, a few of these guys.
B.J. Clark.
B.J. Clark is on it, and it was What a Fellowship from 1992, and everything we are saying, he was right behind us beating the drum.
Yeah.
And so it just, Caleb, I've had to explain several times why that I'm in the position that I'm in, and it is just basically, do you remember who it was that went off to the mission field, came back, and his kids had flat tops?
yeah, I always thought it was Larry West.
Okay.
Because if it wasn't, like,
If it wasn't Larry, it's going to be Max. Was he ever in the mission field? I don't remember.
Who are you? Which one?
Max Lucado.
No, I've never heard that story be from Max Lucato's
Okay,
kids.
so it's
I
Larry
always heard
West.
it to be Larry West,
Okay.
and if it wasn't him, the other person, what I would have thought was Robert Martin, but he still has a flat top,
Yeah,
so
so it
that's
wasn't
not
him.
him.
Yeah.
I always thought it was Larry West, that he came back and everyone had cut their long hair, and his sons didn't know what to make out of
They
it.
had grown their long hair. They all had flat tops when they left the United
Yeah.
States. When they came back, everybody's got long hair, waiting on the Lord's Supper table. We couldn't do that. It's the same thing with us. Basically, I was wrapped up in nothing but overseas. From 1991 to 2005 is when I cut the cord. And I had to come back home, then go back out there. And so, for the most part, I wasn't looking really at brethren.
Mm-hmm.
We were somewhere else and come back, and then just, you're like, what? None of this made any sense. Talking about somebody thinking about jumping ship.
Yeah.
Man, I just started being marked all over everywhere because I just was asking questions. How in the world did all these people get together? And y'all are using people from the Tulsa workshop on the Brown Trail lectures. And, Garland Elkins is out on the West Coast lectures with some of the rankest liberals in the Brotherhood, Tex Williams. And it's just like, well, why did y'all not see this? Because you're in it. It's like you're in that pot of water with the frog, and you're turning the heat up, and you just never saw it. But it's glaring to people that go away, and that I think too is why our Rice, to a degree, was the way he was at different times. Just he would come back from the Orient, and it's like, what are y'all doing? And
To quote Kerry Sword, he said that exact thing. Like, he had spent 20 plus years in Ukraine, and then when he came back, and his statement about Freed Hardeman was, he said, I sent my kids to Freed Hardeman thinking that it would be what it was when I left America, and then he said it's not.
He's more than not.
Yeah, more than
they
not.
were nude art and all kinds of things, and so
Well, and then that's back to where I said what you said about the Garland Elkins thing, being out on the West Coast. When you brought that up to Garland in front of Curtis Cates, Curtis was batting back at you, but then Garland actually admitted, maybe I shouldn't have been out there. And so then this is the point. What's wrong with asking for consistency? Because if this crowd is going to put up their front about being the most sound, then what's wrong with me coming in and saying, no, wait a minute, there's some stuff to talk about over here. And so now I want to introduce another thought, because I want to go back to when I said not promoting a brand but encouraging a work, and it's local work. And this is all just political scene. These are people who are fundraisers. They have to get money. They have to see and be seen and just rub elbows and whatnot. So when I say this, y'all are just condemning them. Y'all don't talk to them and be in a sit-down scene where you could get down to matters. And I will say this too. So thank you for your compliments. I didn't know that he was going to say all that stuff, but I am about to say something for myself. I have done y'all the biggest favor. Can you take me out, Joey? Both of us out. I have done y'all the biggest favor that you could have asked for. You think that the people on this screen are false teachers. Y'all could be dissecting these guys, and you don't. Okay, now we can come back in. It's like John Mark Hicks wrote the book on women preachers. I go and I talk to him. You guys could say, hey, here's a video. I read John Mark Hicks' book. Let me get in here and tell you why I think he got it wrong. And he's not going to have a problem. You're not going to hurt his feelings. Any number of his books, Lagarde's books, you could, he said something in the interview. He said, I live in hope that my books are going to do better than they are. And I said, maybe when you die, they'll skyrocket. But it's like, hey, you could be making videos if you just think that, he's wrong. Read his thesis on Daniel Summer. You'll be doing yourself a favor to educate yourself on Daniel Summer, and then read his stuff about orphan-hating antis, that type of thing. Mac, when we were in school, Wesley came in one day, and Drew and I both had new copies of Mac's book, Except You Be Born From Above. And Wesley picked it up, And I write in all my books, and Wesley thumbed through my book, and he said, "That's some good notes you got going in there." When you see it, you could dissect his stuff. And like I said about Rubel's book, more people just said they didn't like his book than actually read his book. But that's why I say I've done y'all a favor, is you could get in there, chop that up, and none of them are going to be mad. No, I'm not going to be mad. But now I do want to do this. If you're so certain that these children of God are going to burn in hell, and you're just totally done with them, and Jason Roller wants to rip people's head off and eat it with mustard, if that's where you are, then you need to get busy elsewhere. And I say to John Mark about, the Joplin Restoration Forums, Alan Cloyd had this quote where he was talking about Ira Rice. And I said to John Mark, I said, kind of the idea of the Restoration Forums is that we're moving away from people like Ira Rice. And I said, if you're moving away, how come we have to keep talking trash about Ira Rice? And John Mark said, yeah, that's overboard. What Alan Cloyd said, he said, that's overboard. But now here's my thing. If you're just done, if you're done with Steve Wolfgang, and you're done with Rubel Shelley, and you're done with Lagarde and John Mark and Mac, okay, you're done with them. I hear you. What are you doing, though? Because you cannot go to heaven off of somebody else's sins. You have got to be busy. And I'm going to tell you, this is what some busy looks like. And I've had people like asking me, well, what does Caleb think about this? I think that this is effort. I think that that's a man who God loves. And it's like, if you can't stomach hearing that God loves Geno Jennings or Williams, or the people that are just in there, you think that God doesn't love them, boy, you got some problems. And I will tell you, I had that problem. And just Bible education starts fixing it. Now, here's what I'm saying. If you watch John Mark, the last segment of his, he has had just unbelievable tragedy. And my line to John Mark is, John Mark, like Job, I said, John Mark, you have not cursed God and died. That deserves respect. And you know what? When you have your hardship, and I hope that it's not just so traumatic, but his book called Yet Will I Trust Him would help you. And so these people who can help us, and you go back over here, Mac has helped a lot of people, and the people on the screen have been helpful to various folk. It's crazy to me that people think that man can't help folk. And I want us to think about, what does it mean to help folk? Geno Jennings is teaching young men, pull your pants up. He's teaching young women, cover your breasts up. And young women in the Church of Christ need to hear that. Cover your breast up. Cover your thighs up. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, acknowledge that your husband is the head of the house. Boy, do we need husbands as the head of the house. One of the biggest problems with the Church of Christ in America is that it's run by henpecked men. And if it's run by henpecked men, it's run by women. And he is knocking that stuff out. One of the things that really stood out to me when you were telling me about some of y'all's conversation was, he was blown away. He said, y'all got women preachers in the Church of Christ? He can't believe some of the stuff that goes on. And if he knew more, I think he'd be blown away. And this really comes down to now again where you say, well, stuff that should be alarming to us in the Church of Christ, how come it is that we don't see it? And I'm saying because y'all don't think about hermeneutics. Consistently in my conversations with these folk in the interviews, hermeneutics is in there. The history's in there, the hermeneutics is in there, the politics is in there. And y'all just are not in it. And so these notes like this, you ought to really be seeing more of this. And, I'll say Geno Jennings mocks people who speak in a bunch of gibberish and then they call it tongues. He mocks that. And he's teaching that there's one church, and he uses Matthew 16:18. he is not like a charismatic apostolic. He's not, what would you call it, tied up to. He's not hitched his wagon to R.C. Lawson or S.C. Johnson. Here's what basically has happened with Geno Jennings. And you know what? Someone might say, well, in the past he didn't have a problem with S.C. Johnson. And?
He always had a problem with S.C. Johnson.
Well,
S.C. Johnson set him down when he was like 14 years old.
And it coming up underneath the teaching of, whatever you want to say,
Yeah.
coming up underneath the teaching of, he can't help who he was born coming up underneath any more than I can, where people say, Caleb, you're just a Campbellite. I am not a disciple of Alexander Campbell any more than he is of S.C. Johnson. And everybody ought to have that freedom to say that. Just because they were born into something and they say, you know, I'm walking through and trying to figure this stuff out, I just so happen to be born over here, they can't help that any more than you can. And so this someone says, well, I don't mind being born into what I was born into. I'm sure that you don't, you know, because you just think you got the golden ticket and you won the lottery. I don't think that you make it to heaven off of secondhand faith.
Well, I would say at this juncture, I'm begging with you and pleading with you to pray for him. The man had a stroke a year and a half ago, maybe a little more. We're in here that we're not in that. In that instance, we had just finished a very long discussion about our debate. And on Saturday, I had another discussion with him this past Saturday in Dallas, Texas, about our debate. But when he started talking to me about what he is seeing with me, he had 2,000 people sitting out there waiting on him, and he's in this office, hotel office at one of the largest Hilton hotels in Dallas. And he spent the last at least 5 to 8 minutes talking to me about my health. Johnny, you are going to have a stroke. You have got to figure out something, some way, you know, for this not to happen to you. And he said, I don't want you to be. He said, I literally didn't think I was going to be able to pick up a fork. And I'm saying the concern, the compassion for me, he is basically, wherever he goes, people are becoming more holy than when he got there. And he is not in Virginia, in our area. And the apostolics, all of these people are rotten. I mean, they're rotten. You know what he told me? Give me some names. I'll start calling their names out from the pulpit. How would you like it?
Let me say real quick, we couldn't get them to do that.
No, absolutely not.
We couldn't give them a list of names and say, go to town. Which, again, I did a lesson at Wesley School. Their lectureship is preached by students, which I think is smart. And I did my lesson, and Wesley rushed up to me, and he said, what would it have been like if you had preached that at Memphis? And I said, oh, they would have hated it. And then he said, man, if you had preached that when I was a student in Memphis, he said, we would have been on the front row saying, sick 'em. Now, eventually it got too much for Wesley, you know, too hot and heavy. But Geno Jennings says, give me the names of these local apostolics. And he said, I'll get on it. We couldn't do that. And you know what? Jason Rollo, the only two names he knows are Rubel, Shelley, Max Lucado. And it's like that. You know, do y'all know that Max Lucado is called America's preacher? Big deal. You just picked out one of the most famous preachers in America, you know, that anybody could talk about. Now, that idea where you said, y'all, it's a problem when you said people end up being more holy after, you know, some time with Geno Jennings. Listen, you know that I teach from the Bible, and Dad does too, water baptism for the remission of sins. That's not even part of the discussion. We're teaching that. But y'all, you have to, with yourself, recognize it is a problem that we're not concerned about Christian character to having good reputations. I cannot tell you how many young men have said, like, you know, the Bible says an elder ought to have a good reputation. And they're just, these elders don't have good reputations. They're bad businessmen, dishonest businessmen. And Christian character counts for a lot. Going back to Millennial Harbinger, and this is another thing where I said, y'all are just born into something with your secondhand faith. And it's like, you know, say that to me. I don't mind that. I think I'm trying to have my own mind. But Stone and Campbell came out of Presbyterianism, and they're saying, we're trying to figure this out. And so they're doing the best that they can. And one of the things that they said was the biggest note to them as people who were coming out of sectarianism doing the best that they can, and they looked at other people doing the same, they said, one of the biggest things is Christian character. And I feel like right now, to members of the Church of Christ, that's like the last thing on their list. Like, I don't care. Someone says, I don't care how they live. They could just be.
Well, by what they're doing on Facebook, that's really the barometer, an easy thermometer or barometer, whichever one you want to use. Get on people's Facebook and see
Yeah.
it is just absolutely embarrassing.
You wouldn't know they had been baptized.
No.
It's ridiculous. I mean, they look just like the world on Facebook. Now, here's another one. We'll start kind of wrapping up. This, and Ed Harrell is dead, so he can't just come out and defend himself. Like if someone said, well, I don't know, using that quote was exactly what you're shooting for. Did everyone hear that my dad still said, like, me and Gino are still talking about this debate?
I could have appeared again.
Yeah.
They were going to put me on the podium, and I, told the guys I don't want to be on the podium tonight.
Yeah. So before I get into this next quote, let me say one more thing. He had no clue what you were going to say when he let you go to the microphone.
Yeah.
So you come in, and Gino Jennings lets you go, and I'm going to say about Wesley Simons too. Wesley Simons told us in school, he said, never, ever, under any circumstances, let a person get a hold of the microphone. He said, they come up for confession, do not give them a microphone. He said, there's no telling what they could tell into. I hear you. But Gino lets you go to the microphone, and you could have just tore in to who knows what. And here's my thing. Would they let you go to the microphone? No. They wouldn't let you go to the microphone.
Matter of fact, I was thinking about standing up and saying something at C Street when we were there hearing.
They were shuffling their people around.
That's exactly right. So big, husky fellows were actually thinking that we might say something.
Yeah.
Where are the days when the old timers tell about someone correcting a man in the pulpit right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just praise you.
They love it.
They were literally the way they were treating Micah. I thought that he would be on the floor anytime.
Yeah. I can't remember those guys' names now. I know what they look like, but they're big old dudes. And we weren't all sitting together in pews. I had a pew. Dad had a pew. Micah
moved.
Yeah, Micah had a pew. And they started shuffling their men around. Like, it's intimidation. They're trying to intimidate. And what are you going to do? They're going to put hands on you.
Yeah.
No one thought we were there to do any violence, but it is what he said. It's words, and it is their insecurities. So nobody on this would let you have a microphone.
And even when I did get the microphone at another event, Jason Rollo ended up killing the DVD.
Oh, yeah.
So, the elders there, they said they loved it. A correction was made from the floor, and Jason Rollo refused to. He was in charge of Tollstar, and he squashed it. And they just said it was the lesson was so controversial.
The man you corrected said thank you.
Thank you, right, and apologized. And then a couple of other preachers ended up, Jerry Moffat ended up saying something about the event and, how this was the norm. And Tommy Hicks, same thing. I was young back one time, and whatever. It's not, no. This is just totally out of bounds, and it's just, everybody hated cancel culture. Oh, yeah. Did they not?
Yeah.
And these guys are cancel culture.
Yeah. Which is like what they just did to Phil Sanders.
Yeah.
Because nobody has a clue why Phil's not there.
Yeah.
And nobody has a clue why B.J. Clark hasn't been back to Freed Hardeman in either 2 or 3 years. It's just...
And while we're in this setting, can I tell you, pray for Phil Sanders. I do know why Phil Sanders has been doing the things that I just could not believe. I do know. And it's not a secret. He is on his facility search. And I don't know, Phil, if this causes you trouble, then hey, you can overcome it. There are people that would support you if you weren't at Edmond. Their facility is at Edmond. You can overcome that. I mean, we're talking about mountain moving faith. How much faith do you have to have? Mustard seed. Get out of there. And take your videographer with you. I'm praying for you. And I'm asking everybody to be praying for Phil Sanders.
Well, earlier, I think the word that you used was like someone said we took down Phil Sanders from PTP. And, in our minds, it's not like cutting out Phil Sanders. What I just wish that guys would do is, number one, like he just said, he'd be doing himself a favor. He got away from Edmond because it was Randy Roper who went to be on Pepperdine, and they bring in Phil Brookman from Pepperdine to Edmond. No, what I wish is that guys would be more assertive, controversial. I think that Phil Sanders' broadcast is extremely watered down, just extremely. And so same thing for Glenn Colley. I think that Glenn is very watered down. The Jenkins, very watered down. I really am telling you, B.J. Clark is doing the same thing Jason Rollo is doing. They're only going after Max Lucado. It's like there's just a bunch of stuff that could be, and I'm saying, why does it always have to be Max Lucado? Like, do y'all not know any sectarian teachers outside of the body of Christ that are influencing people? You just never hear that stuff. Now, here, let me do this with you real quick about this again on Gino. This is a quote, one of Ed Harrell's good friends. So I have this book with me. It's down on the bottom. So, it bothered people back in the day, I'm sure. Ed Harrell wrote a biography, and when I say he wrote a biography, this is like the official, top-notch Oral Roberts biography, an American Life Oral Roberts. And so Ed Harrell had to spend all this time with Oral Roberts and Pat Robertson, and look at what one of his very best friends said. Brother Earnhardt says this: I had an issue with Ed's biography of the Tulsa miracle worker Oral Roberts when he said that he thought Oral Roberts was an honest man, recalled Earnhardt. I finally came to grips with that when I realized that he was saying that he was not a hypocrite, but that he had a background that would have led to those sorts of visionary things. Earnhardt had come to respect that Harrell was a fair-minded historian, but also that his fellow scholars knew Harrell's convictions. There was no question about his convictions. All his academic compatriots knew what they were, and they respected him. Now, what's wrong with him saying, I think he's an honest man? He has all this interaction with him, just across the board. He has all this interaction with him. He had basically a bid in, if we can say it that way, to write the biography of Billy Graham. He would have had access to Billy Graham. And so when you come in and you just say, look, I don't agree, but not everybody's going to be Joel Osteen. Like, we just consistently agree Joel Osteen's fleecing the people. Kenneth Copeland, fleecing the people. But if Ed gets in there and says, I don't agree with him, but I understand the reason that he does the things that he does, and I just think that he's an honest man, then I just don't understand why that's wrong. I don't have a problem when he did it. I don't have a problem when Dad does it. And I just don't have a problem.
Well, and Caleb, just tell the people, some of the people that have gotten in touch with you, just so they know. And you can prove it.
Yeah, the text messages.
Yeah.
So I have, people that I have on the screen. Glenn Colley did send me a text message, and he just, alluded to my dad as leaving the faith, and it must be traumatic on me. And I just don't see how that is an issue at all. Don Blackwell sent me a text message, again, alluding to my dad is leaving the faith. And
Aaron
Gallagher, who basically it was said, this is, a brother says about getting in contact with Aaron Gallagher. He said, I had asked Aaron Gallagher fellowship questions before that he never responded to. And he said, but then the video of Johnny and Gino happens, and he said, now Aaron's reaching out to me. And so I don't understand it at all.
And I was on the phone with someone in Memphis that Aaron had lunch with, and what is he doing? He is having lunch with someone that he knows that's connected to us, and he's asking questions about us, and so about me.
Right, and then another one that I've heard is, I want to say something too about Orpheus Hayward just a moment.
Didn't Wesley call you up?
Yeah, Wesley did call me up. I forgot about that one. Wesley called, and he took the opportunity, as Wesley commonly does. I haven't had a phone call with Wesley in years where he did not just chew me out. So he says, I saw the video with your dad. he said, I hate to see it, but after all, I hate a bunch of stuff that I see up there. It's like, all right, Wesley. So, but I want to say this. Brad Cobb called me. You know, Brad prints a bunch of books. He's doing a good job with these books. And so he calls me and he said, I have to ask. And he said, I hate it. And I knew what was coming. And he said, I just got off the phone or got a text from somebody. And this is the thing, y'all. We work very hard to get the story straight. And it's only been a couple times for me where it just was like, I got it wrong. Maybe some things I changed my mind on later and I came back, I said I changed my mind. But here's the thing. Brad Cobb said that someone got in touch with him and they said, Johnny has become a Baptist pastor and is telling everybody to call him Reverend. And I laughed when Brad said, I said, boy, it is something how this is making a big turn. So I told Brad, I said, it's not even like we're trying to hide it. I said, it's on the YouTube channel. And he said, well, I didn't know that. And he said, and I said, no, my dad's not a Baptist and he's not commanding people to call him Reverend. And Brad said, I knew that this was not going to be it. He said, I just wanted to ask. And I said, okay.
So I was in Clarksville, Texas 2 days ago.
Maybe.
I just drove in. If you're looking at me, you say, this is a grumpy old man getting all over everybody. I just drove in from Knoxville, Tennessee this afternoon. And so, excuse me if I forget what day it was, but I think it was today is Wednesday. Monday, I stopped to see a friend of ours as we were going through Clarksville, Texas. And I said, hey, take a picture with me. I'm friends with, I'm actually close to your uncle now. And I walked around the counter and we're about to take a picture. And I said, by the way, I don't know if you've heard or not, but I'm starting to be said that I'm a Baptist reverend. He goes, yeah, I saw that on Facebook today.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
So here's what I'm saying is we work really hard. It's like, hey, if I put out facts and he puts out facts and you don't like the facts, I can't do anything about it. Now I have to go on another tangent. Let me say this. You Republican members of the church, you love it when Ben Shapiro tells liberal Democrats, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, you know what? Our news reports, when we put out the facts, don't care about your feelings. So the least you could do is get the story straight. This is,
Well, say that to Central South Carolina School of Preaching also. That dude did not tell any part of the truth.
Yeah.
The pulpit minister there.
Just get the story straight. I mean, it's on the YouTube channel. We're not trying to hide it, but I also do think, though, I think that probably for some people would manifest their ignorance. They don't know the difference between a Baptist and a who knows what. Just, he's all somewhere doing who knows what. Just on and on. But I want to say this now, too. We did one of these videos. I can't remember who it was for. But when I brought up Orpheus Hayward, now, when I say get the story straight, when we did that, I said that at Renaissance Church of Christ, they use instrumental music. And a bunch of people got upset. Now, I do want to tell y'all, typically, I don't use information unless I find it myself, and Dad certainly doesn't. Well, I'm sorry, I'm learning my lesson over here. So I had someone from Renaissance tell me that during a youth day, they did worship with instrumental music. They said it wasn't like an official Sunday morning, but at a youth event, we had, that's what the person said, at a youth event at Renaissance with Orpheus Hayward, they said we had spiritual music with instrumental music. I took it. And I said that on one of these broadcasts, and people have complained. Okay, here's what I want to give you. If you're telling me that at Renaissance Church of Christ, y'all don't use instrumental music, I hear you, and I got it wrong. Now, are you telling me that Orpheus doesn't go out to Pepperdine and worship with instrumental music? Are you telling me that and I'm asking you, when he goes to Pepperdine, is he basically saying, y'all shouldn't be having instrumental music? I'm hearing him say quite the opposite. I'm hearing him basically tout himself as I used to be the upstanding, conservative African American, and now I'm starting to have these different ideas. So it doesn't really sound like I got it all the way wrong. But I do want to clear that up. And so I hope we can move it forward now, and we can just keep talking about what it is. That he is over at Pepperdine, where they are just full on using instrumental music in their worship, and they've got women preachers on the program.
Everybody knew that I was there to talk with Geno Jennings about what we were planning to do. And if they didn't, all you have to do is listen to the video. He gets up and tells that that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
Is we were talking about an upcoming debate, a discussion, him coming back to Virginia. So it's apples and oranges to say that it's the same thing with Orpheus Haywood. Orpheus goes in and calls all of these folk brethren, makes no distinction when he's in an assembly that would be similar.
Yeah, and I just, when you said apples and oranges, it's like, I have to go back to, it's just the typical lectureship scene. That's not what this is. It's not revolving around an institution. It's not a 4-day long lectureship where we're all just seeing each other, eating, and going back home. He's working, and he's working, and I just...
Well, and I can tell you this too. My stock in this particular religion went way up.
So, also, I want to say this about First Church in Philadelphia. I think it matters, y'all, that they don't want to be a denomination. They do not want to be attached to, like, if you're thinking, well, the Church of God located in Cleveland, Tennessee. They are not attached to the Church of God in Cleveland, Tennessee. They are not attached to anybody in New York or anything like that. They're not, the Church of God in Christ is down in Little Rock, Arkansas, or West Memphis. They are not doing that. They just want to be this independent collection of Bible believers. And you ought to give them something for that. They're not out here saying stuff like, I was Baptist born, Baptist bred, and when I die, I'll be Baptist dead. They're not doing that. And I have to say, I think that some of y'all have a hard time even conceptualizing that because you refer to yourself as a Church of Christer, and I never in my life have said...
And you have a Church of Christ preacher.
I know, I don't do that stuff, and y'all do, and that's y'all's problem. Now, that vein of thought where he just said, I just think he's an honest man, here's another one. So you're talking, with Geno Jennings, and I always get his name.
Jesse Lee Peterson.
Jesse Lee Peterson. So Jesse Lee Peterson is a very blunt, controversial podcast host, and he's been involved for years. But he takes on stuff like Black Lives Matters. He's against LGBT. It's not helping anybody for anything. Daddies need to take care of their kids. Just on and on and on. He's mega controversial. And I like a lot of his stuff. And when he was talking with Geno Jennings, he asked Geno, he said, are you the head of your house? And I bet you that he thought that was like a trick question or something. It's so simple. Are you the head of your house? Absolutely, I'm the head of my house. And Jesse Lee Peterson said, you were one of the first people in years who would just come out and publicly say, I'm the head of my house. I wonder... like these conservative brethren in the Church of Christ, how many of them could just freely say, I'm the head of my house?
In front of their wife.
Yeah, and not get an earful on the ride home either. Like, that's it. Now, here's another note, y'all. If you're just certain that these folk, who are your brethren, if you're just absolutely certain that they are just going to burn in hell, then you need to get busy somewhere else, and let me show you this. Jesse Lee Peterson doing a podcast with Geno Jennings. Here's Jesse Lee Peterson doing a podcast with Bill Lockwood. And Bill Lockwood is in the Wichita Falls, Texas area. And Bill Lockwood is Dad's age. And they have been friends for who knows how long. But here's the thing, y'all. Bill has debated Muslims, Pentecostals, and just on and on and on. And he does things like write in the newspaper. He tries to teach on the internet. He preaches with a local congregation. And then he extends himself to talk with Jesse Lee Peterson. And they both know that they have religious disagreements. And Bill will talk about them. Like, one thing is sometimes he will refer to himself as Reverend. And Bill will say, wish you wouldn't do that. and then he gives them the scripture, Psalm 109, verse number 11, I think it is. And he gives that to them. Now, I'm saying, y'all, I just don't see a lot of that happening. And I'm thankful that Bill tries. And there's a bunch of other preachers out there that they
are a very, very successful radio broadcast.
Yeah. And we just see preachers fulfilling their hobbies. There's just so many hobbies. It's like people tell me and Dad, boy, y'all need to get a hobby. And I just think, preachers out there got enough hobbies for me and him put together 5 times over. But he's trying, and that counts for something. And so what we're advocating is we're not trying to promote a brand. We're trying to encourage you to get to work. And the work is not in the lectureships. It's in the local congregation. You go to a lectureship and you just say, everybody in here saved. But then you go back home to your town and you say, everybody around is going to burn in hell. But you spent more energy in a year on that lectureship than you do the people who live next door to you. Now, I got to tell you, I expect some of y'all to go to hell with them. You just cannot condemn your neighbors and then not try and exert all your energy on a room full of saved folk back in Memphis, Tennessee. Or Bryan College Station. It just does not work that way. And I'm saying, y'all read the same Bible I am, and I know that I'm not crazy. And I've heard some degree of y'all sermons where y'all put some folk in hell. So this stuff just doesn't make sense. I'll give, this is one of those, I'm done, but I'll give them a commercial. Is there anything else you want to add?
I would say to Phil Sanders, Phil, if you think, I know that some people are actually saying you don't know how it would feel. I know how it would feel. I've had to redo the whole thing, be in the Pacific, and I find out that my supporters, the congregation that's receiving my support, and some folk on the right are going to say, well, they shouldn't have been receiving your support. I guarantee you I can tear your argument to pieces as far as them having control over me. I came home and redid the whole thing, and I made sure that the people that I went back with knew they were not in charge of Johnny Robertson, and it's never happened again. And it's continued. But I'm saying, Phil, I had to leave Caleb as a baby and my wife out there in the middle of a third world country in the Marshall Islands and come back home and re-raise all my funds. You can do this. I got all of the churches to send me back and was able to go back to work. So don't tell me that you can't get out of Edmond. I mean, you're in America.
Right.
It's God be with you. And I hope and pray that things get better for you.
And on top of that, he is Phil Sanders.
Yes.
It's not like he's an absolute nobody.
And that's what I was,
Yeah.
an absolute nobody.
So as we have all this going out, you might say, well, I don't know how much y'all talked about John Mark Hicks. Well, let me just say it on the way out. John Mark Hicks is an incredibly interesting person, and it's close to a 3-hour-long interview. He has connections to Ira Rice, Rubel Shelley, William Woodson, and he is not a slouch. His work that he's done and his writing, you're not going to agree with everything that he writes. But like I said, the only thing that I wholeheartedly 100% pledge my allegiance and recommend is the Bible. So, take it for what it's worth. I don't say this as we go out. As I bring up Bill Lockwood, after Mac, y'all all know that I interviewed Mac. I also interviewed Bill Lockwood in December at his home in Wichita Falls, Texas. And so...
and he debated Mac Deaver.
Yeah, he debated Mac, so that's the connection.
Very interesting.
I think it was in 1995 or 98 he had a debate with Mac.
And you possibly will hear from the two of them again as a result of the fact that you interviewed.
Well, and I got to tell you, we're supposed to be done.
Yeah.
But now that we're talking about Bill, Bill got so mistreated by people who agreed with him. People who took Bill's position in the debate against Mac treated him so poorly that even Mac recognized, boy, Bill, your friends are working you over. That's why I wanted to go see an interview with Bill. Bill has very, very good debate history, and he did a good job. His is over 2 hours long. I think his got close. Just mark it down. They're all going to be 2.5 to 2:40. Did a good job, and everybody will benefit when his interview comes out. So we've got 2 in the can. We've got 2 more that are upcoming, and I'm fishing, I'll tell you, with a brother who did debating, and he's very under the radar, and he ought to do it. He told me, he said, the only person who'd be interested in seeing my interview is my mother. But He did so many debates. Y'all need to hear from him, and you pray for it. But that's what's coming up, and tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, you'll get to see the interview with John Mark Hicks. So as we go out, that's just another book we didn't have time to get to. We're not trying, like I said, not trying to promote a brand. We're trying to encourage you to do work in your area and also be a free-thinking, free Christian in the body of Christ. You don't have to hit yourself to somebody's ministry and let them get you underneath their thumb. You do God's work, do it to the best of your ability, and you live in a good conscience.
And make sure you pray for me. His hobby is wearing me out.
Yeah, that's the side work of the hobby. All right, we love y'all. God bless you. Keep asking, what does the Bible say?